Welcome back to our listeners to another episode, another installment of La Ventanita podcast.
Yeah.
Jeremy, can you remind us what our listeners are anticipating or what they can expect?
From the podcast show, this show?
Yes, sir.
Well, first and foremost, we have a very, very special guest. Probably the most special guest that we're ever going to have from my perspective.
Mm-hmm.
So I need to say that. And the reason why, it's because it's my rib.
Yeah.
It's the lady who caught my eye. Come on. It's the lady who, when I saw her, I said, this is bone of my bone, flesh of my flesh. No, but we have none other than my wife, Angelica Barahona. This is the first time she's on the show. We're in a small little booth. This is the first time I don't feel awkward in a small little booth at the Mandel Library because I'm with my wife.
That's funny. Yes, it's a very tiny blue color, so it feels kind of like romantic, but it's not at the same time.
It's a little intimate in there.
Kind of. Yeah, maybe like unholy. I'm just playing. All right. Anyways, yes, my wife is in the show today. And today we're going to be talking about evangelism. We're going to be talking about this topic of street evangelism. We've been doing evangelism. And, man, we've been doing it in one of the most old school ways, which is Tocando Puertas. Knocking on doors.
Yeah.
Literally.
Yep.
And spiritually, knocking on the doors of people's hearts. But yeah, man, that's what we're about to get into.
Well, welcome to the First Lady, Pastora Angelica. Welcome to the show. And I know you've been hearing us in our conversations on the side, and a lot of actually what we talk about, you were present for that back when you guys were both here in Chicago. So it's really refreshing to see you and to hear your voice and on this conversation as well. So thanks for joining us.
Thank you, guys. It's so much fun to be here with you both on the podcast. She said I listen to you both as you record many times, and I'm like, oh, that was funny. I get to hear the pre-edits, so it's exciting to be here and kind of go back to that dining table conversations that we used to have.
Here's my question, though. Here's my question for you guys. Where is the evangelist?
Junia, our daughter, is right now with her grandma.
Yeah.
She is straight up just chilling with her grandma right now. Yeah. Abuela, excuse me.
I was really excited to hear from her and her perspective on how evangelism went. But we'll have to save that for another episode.
Right now, she will be tearing this booth down. Too many fun things to hold and cords and things to put in her mouth. So we'll wait until she can babble her own words so that she can tell us in a language that we can understand. Because her heavenly language is too hard for us right now.
I was gonna say that.
Out of the mouth of babes.
That's
Come
right.
on.
That's right. Man, so real quick, can you give us just a brief intro of who you are? Maybe just a little bit about your journey thus far on what it's been like for you as you've partnered with Jeremy in church planting.
Wow, Josh, that's not a real quick question.
I know.
It's been great, honestly. I think it took me a while to come to the scene, what God has shown Jeremy in terms of why we needed to move to this place and do ministry in West Palm in the south side. But I feel like once I saw it, I'm sold. Like it's definitely been exciting, and we have faced challenges. Some you guys have talked about here in the podcast, but through all of that, I think I'm just encouraged to know that we're walking in what God has called us to do as a family, and knowing that He he's the one responsible for the fruit. Like we can convince anybody to put their faith in Jesus, but we do our work and he does the rest. So I think I have experienced a lot of freedom and peace with just knowing that our role is to serve, and then he does the other part, the bigger part. The weight is not on us. And I think even up to this point, it's been for me a lot of like, I want to help more, but I'm home with a little baby. So it hasn't been, I have felt like I haven't been able to be as involved in some of the fun things. Like some nights, Jeremy and Mario go evangelize, but I have to stay home because the baby's sleeping. And some nights we get help, but some other nights I have to stay. So in that sense, if I'm honest, sometimes I feel saddened that I haven't been able to be in some of the things like in the forefront, but I know it's season, so no discouragement in that sense. Like I know this is our season. I'm glad to be with our baby, and I see what God is doing. And so, yeah, I think that's a little brief of how this experience so far has been for us, and really, really excited to see how God is gonna open doors in our neighborhood in long term.
Yeah, man. Well, thank you for sharing that. And you're right on where we want to talk about today. We're revisiting this conversation on evangelism and outreach. And if you heard our trailer that was released previously before this episode, you would know that there was an interest meeting that was being launched at the Light West Palm Beach. So in our segment La Plena, where we keep things real, we talk about the experience. I'll leave this up to you guys. Can you bring us into that story? What was that interest meeting like? What was it leading up to it? What was it to that on that day? What did you guys see? What happened?
Yeah, so to kind of give context, one of the things that we've been recently just trying to navigate is how do we legitimately connect with our community and tell them, hey, we're a church. We are planting a church. So we strategized and we said, man, it'd be fun to do an interest meeting. Maybe that's the move. And by interest meeting, essentially, we just invite everybody we know to come hear more about what we're doing at a church, as a church. And we bought some Facebook ad space, Instagram ad space to promote that. I think it was like 4,700 or so people saw the ad. Wow. We targeted it specifically in the community. So even Facebook was like, you sure you want to do this? Because usually when you buy ad space, you try to get like a specific kind of target group, but you make it wider. But like, we were like, no, it's this neighborhood. And not people who just visit the neighborhood, excuse me, but people who live in the neighborhood. So Facebook, I think it was a Facebook robot. It was like, okay.
The algorithm
spoke to me. Said, okay. We promoted it through a connect that I have actually through a friend of mine, Ness Medina. He was on the show a few weeks ago.
Shout out to Ness.
Yeah, he had a connect, and we were able to get free Chick-fil-A. He had café con leche from Havana.
Yes, sir.
Staple restaurant in the city, especially where we live. And guess what? Nobody showed up. Absolutely nobody came. So that was really discouraging. Because we thought, hey, at the very least, the free Chick-fil-A is going to work.
Yeah, man. I don't know how you're going to turn down free Chick-fil-A and free café con leche, bro.
Yeah.
I think we realized that a lot of people in our neighborhood actually don't know Chick-fil-A.
Or they may have heard of it, but they're not
Right.
like
They haven't like
tried it like that.
eat it enough to like be like, yeah, we love Chick-fil-A.
Oh, yeah.
There's some learnings there, but I think the most important part for us was realizing that, wow, no matter how many great things or hooks we can put to have people want to come, it might still not be a priority to walk into a church building just yet for most of the people that we're in relationships. And interestingly, a lot of people say like, yeah, I'll come, or like, that sounds great, or that's interesting. Yeah, I want to know more about your church. People that we had great conversations, prayer time, where someone saying that they wanted to show up, but they didn't. So that more than just a discouragement for us to be like, oh, we put all this work and nobody came. It was also the realization of this shows us how much people is lost and how much maybe this is not a priority in their lives. Like people is not gonna pursue God,
or this method isn't gonna work.
Right. So we need to do something different in order to help people see who God is and almost like come to them, reach them, show it right in their space, rather than in another space.
Yeah. So I do want to pause there just briefly before you guys continue sharing about what happened. Yeah. I mean, I'm not really familiar with like the strategy side of church planting. Like the what is the word? I guess the approach, when you on how like this interest meeting, it seems like there's kind of like this quote unquote formula that should work, right? But I guess real quick, if you guys can kind of lean into that, where did you pick that up? I don't want to put anybody on the spot and be like,
I got it from him. He lied to me.
But yeah, if you can, if you can share with us a little bit, like, what are some of the things, because I don't imagine that. I imagine some of it is you guys are getting together with Mario. You have that creative space to brainstorm and to collaborate, but you're also receiving training and tools on how to reach your neighborhood. So can you share a little bit about that side of launching into the interest meeting? The whole what did that look like, strategizing as a team?
Yeah, so the idea of the interest meeting really came from me, and it really comes from some of the training that I've had in years past. So it's not something that I've been trained on more recently, but usually when you're starting a church, what church planters do is they do an interest meeting that mainly is targeted toward the workers, Christians from different churches. Usually there's like a sponsoring church that says, hey, go with this family to plant this church. And if you think you might be interested, go to this interest meeting. Right? We haven't had that opportunity much. I mean, we've had some ability to do that. I don't want to say we haven't had it at all. But since being on the ground, we haven't had it maybe but once. I guess we've had different opportunities, but when we were kind of strategizing, it's like more speaking engagements, and then it's kind of like, hey, if you guys are interested, talk to this brother, which has been cool, and we're grateful for that. So as I was kind of thinking through that, I was like, we want to plant a church that reflects the community, right? I'm talking to church planting gurus, and they're like, yo, if you want a church that reflects a community, then start out that way, because it's harder to reverse that later. That's the wisdom that we got. which I still think that's great wisdom. So I said, well, okay, so how do we actually tell people? I mean, besides just serving them, hey, we're starting a church.
Mhm.
So that's where we said, well, let's do an interest meeting and use that formula that a lot of church planters employ with the laborers or the workers. And I said, man, let's take it to the street. Let's try to get the streets into the interest meeting and see what we get.
Yeah.
And we got nothing.
Well, in reality, it was a trial,
Yeah.
Most times when interest meetings are held, as Jeremy said, is catered to Christians, to recruiting other believers to join your work so that you have enough people to start out services or different type of gatherings in the community where you're planting. So for us, it was more like, well, let's see if the community responds. And let's see if putting some things that might sound interesting, like some free coffee, like doing a really cool Facebook ad, following like the advice and how to do this to like really make it inviting for people. So I saw it more as a test trial and as a way to see if this is a way to engage people, and we'll learn a lesson. It's not necessarily the way to reach unbelievers or people that are not yet interested in being part of a church community.
In our community.
In our neighborhood, yeah.
Or at least for us. Maybe somebody else comes in and tries to start a church and they do it that way and they kill it.
Yeah.
But at least for us, it just hasn't worked.
Yeah.
Right. So, I think the lesson was valuable. We didn't really spend much because, again, we got the connection. So Chick-fil-A was donated and we were able to distribute that. We'll talk about that in a sec. So all of the things that we invested on, we still were able to use and repurpose for other things. But it was a learning. I think it was a lesson to think about how, what doesn't work. Sometimes we need to learn those things too.
Yeah, that actually, you're helping me transition into this next question. So you viewed it as a trial. It didn't work. So what did you guys do?
Yeah.
So it started at 6:30, the interest meeting. It's almost 6:30. Actually, I think it's past 6:30. And in the building that we're renting, there's like a courtyard. And I went in the cut and I just started to pray / like, Lord, please, like crying, like, Lord, please bring somebody. We put in a lot of work and time.
Man, I know that prayer, bro.
And I had this sense like, yo, ain't nobody coming, yo. And the crazy thing is later on, my wife and another brother who's on our team, Mario, like we were all in position and they had that same sense too. And sure enough, nobody came. So I'm like starting to feel super discouraged. I'm like, yo, ain't nobody coming. I just know nobody's coming. And out the blue, literally, and I'm like in this courtyard, like outside. And apparently my dad was outside. My dad came to the support. And then my dad just started shouting my name. And I'm just like, yo, what? Like, it sounded like I was in trouble. Because he couldn't get a hold of me because I didn't have my phone on me. And he essentially was like, when I finally was like, yes, Dad, what do you want? That kind of thing.
Yeah.
He was like, he's like, yo, I'm going to hit the street, yo. And yo, no lie, in my heart of hearts, I was like, Lord, I'll do anything but knock on doors. But like, I'm like, yo, how is my dad going to go out there?
Yeah.
And evangelize. And by hit the street, that's what he meant. He's like, yo, I'm just going to go evangelize. Like, I'm, as a leader, I'm like, yo, how am I not going to go out there, and go do this with him? So anyways, man, all the volunteers that were there, they were mostly my family, actually. That was just like,
mostly, or Just your family.
It was just like,
period.
yeah, it really was all my family or people that like I really grew up, like they might as well be my family. They're like literally day ones. And they were just like, yo, let's hit the street. So like literally my dad, my cousins, their kids, like, yo, we went to go evangelize, pass out Chick-fil-A, and promote the Bible study that started yesterday. It was crazy. And we got rid of most of the, actually all of the Chick-fil-A. Yeah.
All of it.
Yeah.
Jeremy didn't have seconds for lunch next day. Like we had to roll out. So I think that was an awesome thing to see. You know, we had 100 Chick-fil-A's. That's a lot of chicken sandwiches, you know. Like once you see that bag with all the chicken sandwich and feel the responsibility of someone entrusted us this food so that it goes to people, what are we going to do with this food? How, like we cannot eat 100 Chick-fil-A sandwiches.
Yeah.
And we didn't want to.
I mean, I wanted to, but we shouldn't.
No. Just the praise for me was seeing it go out to the community. And people, even the interesting thing is that even when people didn't take the sandwich, they talked to us because we were offering the sandwich. So I thought that was really interesting. That even if people, you know, they don't necessarily trust you, they don't know you, they might not know if they are going to like this chicken sandwich or not, because they might not have tried it before, whatever. But they still allow us to talk to them. So because we had rallied some volunteers from our family, shout out to them for their gracious support.
For real.
We were able to do something that just the three of us, we wouldn't have been able to do. To connect with so many people on one day and get to share about the Bible study and about our church. I thought that was really, really great.
And one of my cousins, shout out to my cousin Harold, half Dominican, half Ecuadorian, que lo que. Yo, my man, he had the Chick-fil-A like duffel bag, the warm-up bag. Yo, my man had it on his head. Like if he like lived, you ever seen like in Africa or Haiti? I've been to Haiti. And, like people wear like product on their head. Bro, my man was walking through the hood, through alleys, bro.
Man.
With that on his head. And the whole time I'm like, yo, why doesn't my man Harold just let me hold it with him? Like there's two handles. Yeah, or at least wear the, you know, the strap over your neck.
Over his shoulder, yeah.
Yo, but my man was like, nah. Like you're the one out here talking to people about Jesus. Like I'm for you.
That's an armor bearer right there, man. That's armor bearer ministry.
Bro, my man was through, bro. We got pictures of it. We got my man walking through the hood, bro, through the alleys.
Wow.
Like with hot chicken on his head, bro. And yeah, man, I think at the time I was just kind of like, man, I can't believe I'm doing this right now. But in retrospect, that was hilarious.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think something to kind of mention about neighborhood is that there is sadly, a lot of homelessness and a lot of people just in the street. So, yeah, the fact that we got this provision that we were able to share, I think we might not know today who was really blessed by that provision of food, but that one meal that maybe saved that tired parent from cooking, or spare someone in the street from going hungry. So I feel really blessed by that reality, but that was not all of it. And there's more to it, and it's the God conversations, like the fact that we went out and people welcomed us. There were a lot of testimonies of just God really touching people and showing them how He's been reaching out to their lives.
Man, do you mind talking about what those conversations sounded like?
Yeah, so pretty much our approach, you know, was just real. Like it was just straight up like, hey, my name is Jeremy. I'm starting a new church. I'm a pastor. The name of the church is the Light. And man, is it okay if I invite you to something real quick? It was either that, or we would start out with, man, do you have a minute just to talk about God? We're out here just trying to hear people's perspective on God and also give our perspective on God. And the crazy thing was, man, people would actually talk to us. I mean, of course, you get people who are like, nah. And we're not the type of people that were just like, nah, but you got to hear this. Your blood is on my hands. Yeah, like, they're just like, all right, if you don't want to talk to us, cool. And I think since we live here, it's like, man, I'm probably going to see you around the way anyways. And hopefully, we could build a relationship. But yeah, that was our approach. And then when people would say, yes, I'm down to talk, man, we would ask them good questions, like questions about, man, what does it mean to have a personal relationship with God? And actually try to listen to people. And then we would ask them politely, like, man, can we share a little bit about what that means to us and what we believe the Bible is trying to say to humanity. So from there, we would just talk to people about Jesus. We would talk to people about God's grace. We would talk to people about some of the social issues, even if they didn't call it that, but like just the social issues that plague them. Like we were able to just kind of engage people on those things. But the crazy thing is, I would say more than anything, we were able to kind of, how do I say this? Like in some ways, engage people's stories. Listen to their stories and engage them, give them a God perspective to their story.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Man, thank you for sharing that. It's really cool to see that you guys, didn't stay down in your discouragement, but you guys took it out to the streets. So
bro, I had my little nephews. My little nephews were hype, bro. I didn't mean to cut you off, but yeah.
No, you're good.
Yeah. Yo, my little nephews, they were hype, bro. All walking through the neighborhood, passing out chicken, being like, yo, can I come to your Bible study, Uncle? And I'm going to tell people about it. And I was just like, all right, cool.
Yeah. So dude, it's so cool to see your family involved with that too.
Yeah.
To see that.
I was going to say that for us, we knew that this could happen from the beginning. Even when we talked about, before we got the Chick-fil-A, we thought about barbecuing, which would require a little bit more work and financial investment. But we said, well, nobody shows up. We just take the burgers and knock on doors. So we already had this idea in our mind that this could happen and that this will be our approach. But it was more, if we're honest, but we hope that doesn't have to be the case. Kind of dreadfulness about having to go knock on doors. But it was what God wanted. I think for us, we realized it's like what was our plan B maybe was God's plan A. So.
Man, that's a perfect segue actually into our next segment, which is Ivos. So I do want to ask, kind of leaning into that a little bit more, maybe you can tease it out a little bit more. What have you noticed worked? What didn't work? What have you observed in this approach? And have come to the realization that this is actually part of the DNA of the Light West Palm Beach when it comes to evangelism?
Yeah, I would say that we have realized and continue to be affirmed that our first task as a church or our first way of connecting with people is out on their terms, where they're at already, at the park, in their homes, in the courtyards, at the school. So in some sense, it kind of reaffirm that what we have been doing in the last 7 months, trying to serve and connect in these third spaces, is what we need to continue to prioritize. And in some way, it's good that we offer the Bible study and that we have a space that we can point people to, especially when people do want to ask more questions or want to be in community, but in some way not expect that to be the primary mission. So we're not planting a Bible study or Sunday service. We are reaching, and really our job is to get into the neighborhood, know the streets, know the people, know where they live, know their story, pray for them, and continue to be in some way a shepherding and witness to our neighborhood. And the hard part of that is that, and I think we wrestle with this, is like, but when is people going to be ready to come and want to follow you and want to be, do this Christian community thing where we are meeting and doing Bible studies and, like, for example, yesterday had a great lesson for children, but we had no children. So we had like to say, well, we'll keep it in the box. And when children do show up, we have the lesson ready. But is that desire, we do desire to see people wanting to follow Christ and become family with us, as our value states. But we know it starts with loving them and sharing the gospel. And that doesn't happen in the building, that happens in the street. So in some way, it keeps reassuring some of the things we feel, also pointing to what the priorities are for this season of our church.
I think if I take a step back, I think honestly, man, I'm just really discouraged right now. And I think part of my a large part of my discouragement is just asking myself, man, in these last few years of ministry, what have I really been doing? And not in the sense where I feel like my pastoral ministry before planting a church has been meaningless, because I think it's shaped me and it's shaped other people's. But I think, what have I really been doing in terms of evangelism, in terms of meeting people right where they're at? I just get burdened because, man, I'm really passionate about the church reflecting the community. But the more and more I'm doing this, I'm like, that's really, really hard. Like, that's really, really difficult. Like, it's really difficult to just, I mean, and it's not like we're not having good conversations, man. It's not like people aren't like receptive to the gospel and things like that. But I'm just like, it's just hard to get them into our quote religious, not really, I don't want to call it religious services, but our rhythms, our rhythms as a church.
In relationship to what we talked about the interest meeting and even changing your approach, is that something that both of you have seen growing up in the churches that shaped and formed your understanding of church ministry and outreach?
Yes.
Or what is it that you saw, and how are you navigating that tension?
You're saying like the interest meeting type stuff?
Interest meeting and outreach, both.
The knocking on doors, right?
Both.
Oh, both. Okay.
Yeah. You grew up seeing that?
I'll say for me, I never saw an interest meeting done or anything on that turf. I always saw evangelism, street evangelism. Actually, my church back home, every Saturday morning had a crew of people go do exactly what we did, knock on doors. And
in Venezuela.
In Venezuela, yeah. And we will, like, almost, it was a very strategic approach in the sense that they will zone the city and be like, okay, in the year, we're going to cover all of these neighborhoods around us. And in all of those neighborhoods, we have a small group that meets in that zone, so that when we are knocking on doors and telling people about the good news, we're not just knocking on doors, throwing a flyer at their face. We're saying, hey, this is the good news of Jesus. And by the way, that house over there, they're believers. You can go there whenever you need something. And we will do that neighborhood after neighborhood after neighborhood, and go back again and circle back into these communities. And some Saturdays, there were like 10 people there. And some other Saturdays, you had 50 people going to do this work. And to be real, I hated it. It was one of the only things that I always dreaded about being in the church. And because I was in some way a youth leader, and then I became the leader of the like the media side of the church, I felt like I was responsible to go to show an example. But there was always this struggle in my heart. I'm like, oh, I hate doing this. I'm a I don't like talking to a stranger on the street, and I don't like being connected. But having that experience now, looking back, I'm like, I'm so grateful, because all the fears got broken down then. And my church was really good at partnering someone who knows how to do it with someone that has no clue. So for the first few times I went, I honestly just kind of sat in the back and watched other people do it, and was the person with, here is the paper. I wouldn't be doing a lot of the talking. But that taught me a lot. I could watch people do it and see the genuineness of this. And that was like a big part of the growth of the church, was just going to the street and then calling people and pointing them to the group that met in their neighborhood. And it was a really valuable part of the way the church grew, at least my home church.
Yeah, I think same for me. Yeah, I grew up, man, like pretty much just doing what we did. In many ways, like it was like all my cousins either called me or texted me the same thing. They're like, yo, man, yo, cuz, don't be discouraged. We call each other cuz. And we're just like, yo, cuz, please don't be discouraged. But man, you got to go out and get it. Like, you got to go out there and just old school. Like, you got to be out there, like, talking to people, fam, and just, you know what I mean? Like, don't be afraid. And, so, I mean, in many ways, what they echoed is just what we grew up saying. Just straight up going to somebody and being like, yo, if you died today, fam, or if you met God today, where would you stand before a holy God? Yeah, just like that. That's in some ways, that's the reason why I didn't want to do that, because growing up, I don't know, it'd be kind of awkward, right? Like, you're evangelizing with your church fam, and you see somebody from school, and you're just like, dang, I don't want to be.
Hey, man, I hear you, bro.
On, you know, so like, I mean, whatever. Like, it has everything to do with, you know, just image. It's like, man, I don't want to be looked at as like a Jesus freak or something like that. But like, but it's okay, you know, like it's all right.
Man. So we're wrapping up on our time, but Angelica, you said, you know, you come to realize that you're supposed to meet them on their terms and on their turf, in their space. So on Tuesday, I noticed on my phone I got a missed call from Jeremy. Tuesday, you know, I play basketball with guys from my church, and so I hit Jeremy back up. And tell us about Tuesday, man, because I want to hear that story again. I want to hear about what happened that evening, and I want our listeners to know what God is doing through you guys.
Yeah. So as I said before, like, it was pretty much my family, a pastor friend of mine, and one of my day one dudes that might as well just be family. We swarmed the block. Like, we just out there knocking doors, you know, knocking on doors. And later on, afterwards, my dad texted me. He's like, yo, I met this dude, gave me his number. I told him you would call him. Fast forward, called dude on Tuesday. And I'm just like, yo, my name is Jeremy. I'm a pastor. I'm the pastor. He's like, oh, yeah. I talked to your dad, cat from El Salvador. And then I was just like, as I'm wrapping up the phone call, I was like, yo, could I pray for you? And he's like, yo, not only can you pray for me, could you pray for the rest of the people that live in this building? Like, he's like ready to take like prayer requests from everybody. So I don't know why I said this, but I was like, yo, what if I just come over there right now and just pray for you? So he was like, bet. This is all in Spanish, by the way. I get to the building. He meets me outside. I go inside, and everybody's there. It's like 4 or 5 people there, ready for the pastor to give them a little prayer. Una bendición is what they kept saying. So
it's a blessing.
It's a blessing, yeah. So as I'm praying, I was just praying scripture, like that came to mind over people. I'm not like a prophet or anything. I was conscious of what I was saying. I just was just praying for people, scripture. Afterwards, so actually, before I say afterwards, during the prayer, yo, these mugs got on their knees, yo, crying out to God as I'm praying, like crying, like, Lord, like, please, like, bless me.
Yeah.
So obviously I'm like not gonna stand on my knees. I was just like, I guess we're going underground. Yo,
You joined in with them?
I joined in with them. I was like, all right, well, I guess that's what we doing. So I'm praying for them. So then afterwards, each one of them began to ask me like, yo, because I prayed for each one of them. Honestly, I didn't even think much of it. I was just doing what I regularly do. And they were like, yo, why did you pray that scripture over me? And I was just like, I mean, it just came to mind. And then like, they were just like, man, like, do you believe in prophecy, man? Like, because, man, what you just prayed is exactly where I've been. Like, unanimously. So, I mean, again, I'm not saying I'm a prophet or anything like that, but like,
yeah,
it just reminded me, man, how powerful the word is. How the Lord opens doors, and that's a group of people that I've been connected with since. So, so that, yeah, a lot of good came out of that. And that's just like one story. We've had other stories from that night. And since because after that, we continued to hit the block. So
it's become part of our rhythm as a church. Like, we are going to take it to the streets, at least in these certain times of the week, so that we can continue to grow in relationship, in evangelism. And as long as we keep having favor, we're going to keep knocking on doors. And I know when Jeremy and Mario went last time, there were some people didn't open the door to them, and that's okay. But there were, people that kneel down and receive the prayer. So I think we see both, and is learning again to trust God with the results of what we're doing. Our labor is in His hands. And it's easier said than done. Like sometimes we go through the emotions of like, wow, we're so excited that God did this through me. And then we're like, wow, God, did nothing. Nobody showed up, or these people didn't open the door, or this person didn't even answer my text and didn't show up when we were supposed to meet. So I'm not going to romanticize that it's all great, but it's not always all right. We see like our highs are really high and our lows can be pretty low too. Just to our listeners, just pray with us that God will bring the fruit in His time, and that it will be good.
Man, thank you so much for sharing the everything from the highs and lows of evangelism and ministry to even being real with and vulnerable with us about the process of it all. So thank you guys for this time. I do want to leave it for you guys to share, one last word, one last thought, anything for our listeners.
Man, people need Jesus, yo. People need Jesus. And like, I know that's so cliche, but for real, like when you really talk to people about God, about family, man, you just realize, man, we live in a really broken world, man. And Jesus is our only hope, man. So I just want to encourage you, man. Maybe you're like me and you're like, man, I don't want to do these certain things. Man, I want to encourage you to do it. Do it at your job. Do it, I don't know, knock on doors if that's what God calls you to do. Because people really do need hope right now.
That's a great word. I think you don't have to be a pastor trying to plant a church to share the treasure that God has given you. And yesterday, one sister that attended a Bible study, she was so just having so much joy about, like, I just want to tell people about his good news, because what I received is so good. And when I look at my life, what it used to be and what it is now, like, I'm here because of God, and I want other people to know that they can have hope too. That encouraged me, and I hope that from all of this, that's a message for all of our listeners. Like, sometimes all the bells and whistles are extra. Like, all we need is to show people how genuine we are, and what God has done in our hearts, and and share the gospel.
And thank you for that. Thank you for sharing your burden for people to know Jesus, but also reminding us of that urgency too. For those of us who are listeners and would call ourselves believers and followers of Jesus Christ, there is an urgency for us to go out and proclaim the good news of Jesus, and and a reminder that we're not in this calling alone either, that we're unified and connected by the blood of Jesus, and we share this calling together as the global church. So thank you for that. Thank you, Angelica, for joining us on this episode, and we definitely have to have you on again soon. All right, y'all.
Amen.
That's our time today. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you. Peace.
Peace.